So, you want to write a book, but you aren't sure where to start? Well, stick around because I've got you covered. Hello everyone, Aylin Hart here, and first I'm going to apologize for the way I sound. My throat is really scratchy and I'm kind of stuffed up. I've been really sick for the last 5 or 6 days. Well, I'm not going to let that stop me, so here we are. So I'm just going to apologize if I have to take breaks for water. So the other day I was making a list of all the videos that I wanted to film, and I came up with about 20 or 25 ideas, and I was getting really excited and putting them on my calendar. And then I stepped back and I thought, what's the reason that I came to AuthorTube in the first place? I first came to AuthorTube when I was brand new, and I wanted advice from the experts, from the people who had done it all before. And I realized that some of my video topics were either, authoring 201 or, more advanced stuff. And so I really wanted to start a series and talk about the basics. So I decided to create a series of Author 101. So today we're going to start with how to write and finish your book, which is not as easy as it sounds. Next, we'll move on to planning your launch. Then we'll move on to how to market your book. We'll talk about how to create an online author platform. I'm going to be interviewing a close friend of mine about how to brand yourself as an author. And we will also be talking to a book blogger about how to create relationships with bloggers. So if there's anything else that you want to see, feel free to leave a comment below or even email me or DM me on Facebook, and I'll be happy to add it to my Authoring 101. First, let's get started with step number 1, having a story idea. Coming up with a story idea is pretty easy. There's a lot of tropes and a lot of plots out there, and nobody's really reinventing the wheel. There are popular tropes for a reason, because they're tried and true. But your idea has to have legs. Your idea has to be big. It has to carry us through 50, 60, somewhere upwards of 100,000 words. Just an idea alone isn't compelling enough to write a book about. If this is your first book, I would really urge you to at least rough outline your book. Now, here's the thing. I fall somewhere between a pantser and a plotter. If you aren't familiar with those terms by now, a pantser is someone who sits down and they write by the seat of their pants, meaning they only have a general idea of what they're going to write about, and they sit down and they miraculously write a book. The second to that is a plotter, and that is someone who sits down and meticulously plots out their book point by point, chapter by chapter, sometimes even scene by scene. I've talked about this before, but I fall somewhere in the middle. I don't personally feel comfortable just sitting down with a keyboard and just writing a story, because I'm always afraid that my story isn't going to follow, the arc that we're supposed to follow, and my inciting incidents and my middle piece. They're going to get lost in there somewhere. My black moment's going to come at the wrong time. So I fall somewhere in between. I do give myself a rough outline, and then I sit down and I pants to the rest of my book. If this is your first book, I would highly suggest outlining at least 5 things. And I have included a PDF download below of these things in order so that you can at least have an idea, so when you sit down, you don't get lost. The first thing that I would highly suggest planning out is your inciting incident. Without an inciting incident, you really have no story. We don't know why we want to follow your protagonist on his journey. It's sort of everything that your story is hinged on, and you need to have a good idea of what's going to hook a reader in that first chapter and make them continue reading. The second key thing that I think that you need to plot out is what's typically called the end of the beginning. This is sort of the point of no return for our protagonist, and really propels the story forward and really starts taking us on that journey with the protagonist. The third key thing that you need to plot out is the midpoint. The midpoint is the middle of your book. Our protagonist has already overcome a few obstacles, they've gotten to the middle of the story, and a lot has already happened, but we know that so much more is going to happen. So you want to plot out lots of little conflicts or problems and different ways that they overcome those problems. Maybe there's a lot more character building, some flashbacks, but whatever it is, we need to get more invested, more emotionally involved in the story, and you need to fill a big chunk of your book with this. And so that's why this part of your book is often called the marathon of the middle, because you get past that first inciting incident, and then you have this huge chunk of book that you need to fill with story till you get to the next big thing that you need to plot out, and that is number 4, the black moment, the all hope is lost moment, the dark moment, the bottom of the barrel, whatever you want to call it. Your protagonist has been defeated, they're feeling like all hope is lost, and maybe they're just feeling really low, and this is where they're gonna gather up all of their courage and everything inside of them, every ounce of strength they have, and they are going to persevere and carry on. And the 5th and final thing that I really think that you should sit down and at least have an idea of what you want to happen is the end of your book. You need to know what you're working towards. What is the resolve? What is the satisfying end of your story, and tying up all of those loose ends. Other things that you could start to plot out are subplots, which will really help you fill a lot of that middle of your book if you create interesting subplots, lots of conflicts and resolutions. Your characters should always kind of have little problems and resolve them until they get to that really big problem that takes everything inside of them to resolve. So again, if this is your first book, just sometimes having a story idea isn't going to be enough. And I'm going to tell you another little story about myself. So something that not a lot of people know is how I got my start in writing. Now, yes, I published my first book 2 years ago, but I got my start in writing millions of years ago, probably 8 or 9 years ago, and I found my way to online storytelling forums where I would write stories, short stories, and post them, and then I found my way to Tumblr. On Tumblr, I posted stories in serial format. And I'm actually, even though it's really embarrassing what I did on there, it embarrasses me now, I really learned a lot of my strengths as a writer. It's actually how I decided to become a romance writer, because I started out writing a lot of YA and dystopian and a lot of paranormal kind of stuff. But it was through writing there that I really discovered that I had a talent for creating romance and creating satisfying romances. And so when I did decide to become an author, that's the road I decided to take. Now, here was the thing about telling stories on Tumblr or anywhere else that people write stories, like for fanfic. Your stories really didn't have to go anywhere. You could start a story and you could carry on with the same characters for 2, 3, 4 years, and the people who followed you would be perfectly happy with there being no black moment, no dark moment, not a lot of conflict. They were pretty happy with that. They were satisfied with that if you just carried on. So your stories really didn't have to have a lot of legs. They just had to have characters that your readers liked, and they would keep reading you for years. And if you did end a story, if you did follow, the classic storyline and end a story, your readers would get kind of upset and want you to bring them back. Also, if you came up with what you thought was the most brilliant story ever and you started it and then it lost steam right in the middle, because that's what typically happens when you sit down to write a book without an outline, is you get to the middle and all of a sudden you're like, shit, I don't have enough to fill my pages. I don't know where to go from here, and you scrap that project and move on. It was really easy to do that on places like that, and I can't even tell you how many novels I actually started and didn't finish because I didn't know where my story wanted to go. I had a great idea, maybe I had fantastic characters, and maybe I had like a great key scene or inciting incident, but I didn't have enough to carry my story through that marathon and get it through the middle and get to that conflict, and they would fall flat and I'd toss them to the side and never finish them. I have about 4 or 5 books, which probably doesn't sound like a lot to other authors because they probably have the same pile of books, that I just never finished because I didn't give them enough steam or traction to carry me through. Even if you are a die-hard pantser, and there are so many authors who are pantsters, probably the most famous of them all is Stephen King. He is a famous pantster, but he also has story arc running through his veins. So he is a professional who's been doing it for so long, he can sit down and pants his butt off, but he knows in his bones, deep in his DNA, how a story goes, and so he can do that without an outline. I've said enough on that topic. Let's move on. Number 2. Plan out your characters and your world. Who is your protagonist? Who is your antagonist? Or what is your antagonist if it's not a person? And who are your supporting characters? What are their relationships to your protagonist or antagonist? What is their archetype? And same goes with your protagonist. What is their archetype? What are they like as a person? What are their fears, wants, hopes, dreams? What is their negative traits, their positive traits? What drives them as a human being? You need to know all of this stuff so that your characters can each have their own separate and distinct voice, their own mannerisms, their own quirks, their own fears, their own goals, and this will create compelling characters that will interest your readers and keep them wanting to know more, feel for them more, and be empathetic towards them. You should also plan out your world. Now, it depends on what you're writing, how in-depth you want your world to be. For me, I write small town romance. Not too hard to really build my world. Give me a lake and some trees and I'm good to go. But if you're writing fantasy or anything with sci-fi or a dystopian, you really want to get more in depth with your world and how you're going to create your world. Usually for me, I just pick out a little town. Sometimes I have pictures that I save to my desktop or in a little folder, and I'll refer to them whenever my characters are out and about in their world and interacting with other people. So I kind of feel like I'm in this town, I'm living in this world, and so are my characters. But again, depending on what you're writing, that part of your process is going to be a little bit more in-depth or not. This brings us to number 3, research. I am a research junkie. I love to research. It's my favorite part. Now, no matter what you're writing, unless you're writing something in your own world and in your own bedroom, then you're going to need to do some research about where your characters live, maybe some of their hobbies and topics, even professions. And this is where you're really going to start deep diving into the internet or books or anything else where you can get a grasp on what it is. Let's say I personally right now live in a small town, and if I want to write about a character who lives in New York, I know nothing about New York. So I'm definitely going to want to do some research. If my character is a lawyer, and I'm obviously not a lawyer, I'm going to want to do some research and learn about that profession. Or if they have a hobby such as golf or something else that I know nothing else about, I'm going to want to do my research so that when my character is doing this or thinking about this or talking about this or living in this world, it can be as believable as possible. I've even gone so far as to elicit the help of my friends on Facebook and just put out a blanket statement. Hey, I have a new book that I'm writing. My character lives in this town in Alaska and he's a fisherman. Do I have any friends who have ever lived in a fishing town in Alaska? Hit me up, I've got questions for you. And I'll always get a response from people who either know someone or have lived somewhere like that, and I can ask them really in-depth questions about those areas or about the lifestyle. So again, conduct your research before you start writing. That way, once you start writing, you already know everything and you're not going to have to pause in the middle of a paragraph and hop on Google, do some research about what it is that you're writing about, because you kind of already know. You're living in this world already. Number 4, have a writing space. Not everybody has the luxury of having an office. No, I don't. I've had a lot of various writing spaces over the last couple of years, depending on my mood and where I'm feeling most comfortable at that time. But it's important to have a space that is yours. That's where you write. That's where you get comfortable. It's going to help you develop a little bit of a routine. My first writing space was in my bed with my laptop. Now, at the time where I started writing, I actually had a leg injury, so I had to sit in my bed. And then once the leg injury healed, it just sort of became my thing. You know, I'd get in my bed, I'd have my laptop, I'd have a spread of books next to me and all kinds of things, and that was my writing space. And then I decided I really wanted to take it more seriously, and I started setting up a desk and doing all this stuff, and that is my writing space. I don't use my desk for anything else, so I have 2 desks. I have one desk that's upstairs in my kitchen, and that is sort of the family desk, and then I have this desk right now in my room, and this is my writing desk, and this is what I do here. That's what I use it for. Maybe I decorate it a certain way, I have all my tools ready, and this is just where I write. It doesn't matter where you go. If you say write at a coffee shop, or maybe you write in an armchair, or you write out on your patio, whatever it is, make that your space so that when you sit there, it just sort of becomes part of your habit and routine as a writer. Number 5, assemble everything you need. Now, you might be thinking you don't really need much more than your keyboard and an idea, but you really do. Do you need a cup of coffee? Do you need a cup of tea or water? Do you need a pen and paper? Do you need all of your writing books? What do you need to sit down and write so that you aren't getting up constantly to get things? You sit down, you're writing, you're 2 or 3 chapters in, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh my gosh, I don't have this, I gotta get up. And then you break that momentum, you break that speed that you're going at. So have everything ready before you write. Have everything within arm's reach, or you can turn and get it quickly if you need it so that you are prepared to write. Just like doing your job at work or just like anything else, you want to be prepared to sit down and write your book. Number 6, set goals. I'll even go so far as to say set deadlines for yourself. Now, at this point, you kind of are your own boss, and your deadlines and goals can be whatever you want them to be. But I think that sitting down and having an idea first of how many words you want to write in a book, and this is where I'm going to suggest that you research your genre, because every genre sort of has a typical word count. In romance, you can go as low as about 50,000 words to have a complete novel, up to about 80 to 90,000 words. Some are longer, some are shorter, but I think the standard is usually about 50 to 70,000 words, if it's correct from the last time that I looked. But other genres might be expecting more of you, anywhere from 80 to 100,000 words or even more. It really just depends. So you're going to want to know about how many words you want to write, and then you're going to say to yourself, okay, I want to have this project done by this amount of time. Now, if you're saying, I want to write a book in a year, great, good for you. Set that as your goal, mark it on your calendar, and then figure out how many words you need to write a day or each writing session to meet that goal. I definitely set deadlines and goals for myself, and especially deadlines of when I want to have my book done, because that gives me a purpose, it gives me drive, and it makes me accountable to write every single day. Now, right now, I am taking it a little bit slower. I'm writing a novella for an anthology piece that will be coming out in November, and it's not even due till August. So right now, my goal is to write 500 words a day, and I'm perfectly okay with that. Now, when I was writing at a quicker speed, when I wanted to write an 80,000 word book and I wanted to have it done in, say, 2 or 3 months, my goals were bigger. They were loftier. They were more in the like 1,500 to 2,000 words a writing session. And that worked for me then. Whatever it is, figure out what works best for you. The idea of having a deadline is that you have something to work towards. It helps you push yourself forward, and it really makes you think, okay, do I want to do this or do I want to meet this goal? And then that's where you need to kind of weigh out your priorities. I also think if you want to take that a little bit further, you should have a first draft goal and a finished book goal, because they're two very different things, and we will talk about that a little bit later. Number 7, limit your distractions. And I think that this also kind of goes back to having everything you need ready. When I sit down to write, I make sure that everyone is fed. I make sure that everyone knows that I'm writing. I turn off my phone or put it in another room. I use an app called the Freedom app so that I can block myself from getting on Facebook and other social media, because that is one thing that definitely distracts me. Is I think, oh, I'm just gonna hop on for a second and I'll get right back to writing, and next thing I know, I've liked 20 different kitten memes and I haven't written a thing. Whatever it is that you find distracting, whether it is your phone, whether it's social media, whether it is family members who haven't been fed or need things, find out what you need to do to limit your distractions so that once you do sit down, all you are focused on is writing. And I highly recommend the Freedom app. It is really, really cheap to install, and you can set different writing times. So if you say, I don't want to be able to get on the internet for an hour, you can set it for an hour, you can set it for an hour and a half, whatever it is that you have decided you're gonna write for, you can block those times out on your computer. It won't let you on, it'll give you this pretty little green screen with a butterfly, and it'll say, sorry, you can't access that site right now. And then once that time is up, you can get back to whatever you want. I think it's probably one of the best things that I've ever used, and you can put it on your phone too, so that if you decide to keep your phone next to you for whatever reason, you can block websites on your phone so you're not on Instagram or email or any of that kind of stuff. Now we are ready to number 8, write. Writing a book, and especially writing your first book, is definitely not easy. So hopefully by now you've gotten through all of these steps and you're ready to sit down and you're ready to write. And I also just kind of want to push this into my next number, and that is number 9, don't self-edit. I've had arguments with a lot of friends about this because I do have a lot of friends who self-edit as they go along. I am a huge, huge, huge advocate for just sitting down and writing. Don't worry about how pretty your words are. Don't worry about misspellings that are on your page right now. Don't worry about a lot of stuff. Just sit down and get words out of you. You will be surprised once you push yourself past the point of self-editing and going back and rereading, which please don't go back and reread your chapters, just keep going. If you go back to self-edit or you go back to reread stuff, you're gonna lose that story momentum. You're gonna lose that drive. And I have talked about this so many times about my garbage writing process, where seriously sometimes the words that I put on paper are so ridiculous and so ugly. I have I've written entire conversations, huge chunks of dialogue where I didn't use dialogue tags or action or anything because I wanted to get that conversation that was in my head just out of me and onto paper before I lost it, or maybe an incredible scene that had been dancing in my head. I want to get that out of me and not worry about what do those words look like right now. And this is where we're going to talk about first drafts. First drafts are ugly, my friends. First drafts are not good. That doesn't mean that your story isn't good. It just means that first drafts are first drafts for a reason. Write everything you need to write, and then that's when you're going to go back in and you're going to make it sparkle. You're going to punch it up, adding in metaphors and all this kind of thing, and making your words prettier and your prose nicer and everything flow better. And you're going to get rid of all those filter words and make the writing really have a punch. But when you're first sitting down and you're just trying to get that story out of you, I highly suggest not worrying about being a perfectionist and not worrying about structure, and seriously just getting that story out of you so you keep that momentum going, so when you do get to that marathon of the middle, you're just on a roll and you can't stop writing. And don't worry about it. You can go back later and make it beautiful. This brings us to number 10, and that is have a plan for the marathon of the middle and have a plan for writer's block. As I've said before, and as you'll hear a lot of writers say, that marathon of the middle, unless you've written a book and you've gotten to that point in a book, it really is a thing. It is hard, and we've all been there. We've had just this momentum, this drive, and all of a sudden we get to that halfway point in our book and we're like, oh my gosh, now what? How do I fill this? You need to have a plan for that, and that's why I suggest having an outline. Maybe even if you are just diehard, no, I am pantsing this, whenever you have an idea, just write it down on a piece of paper, even if you aren't there yet. That way you aren't outlining and going against what is in your blood. But write down ideas as you have them, so maybe you can refer to that. Again, have a plan for writer's block, or as I call it, writer's slump, because I don't technically believe in writer's block. If it's just pushing yourself past it, maybe it's taking a step back for a couple of days, maybe it's going out for a jog or connecting with friends or watching a movie. Whatever it is, have a plan, because you will probably hit a time in the writing of one of your novels where you're just going to hit a roadblock and the words aren't coming, and it's okay. It happens to everyone. I don't want you to stop. Don't get discouraged. Don't think that you can't do this and you aren't a real writer, because again, that's something that all of us think. We get to the middle of our book and we're like, what in God's green earth made me think that I could do this? We all get to that point, and it's totally okay. It's totally normal, but have a plan for when that happens. What are you going to do to combat that? The last one that is not on my list is just celebrate. Once you type the end, whether you type it or not, once you hit that end of your book, definitely celebrate. Celebrate the end of a first draft, because then you're about to go into revision and edits, but celebrate that you did that. You just went through that marathon of the middle, you went through all of your plot points, and you wrote a book, and you need to celebrate that. Whether you go out and you buy a bottle of champagne, or maybe you go have dinner with friends, or maybe your significant other takes you to somewhere special, or like me, you just eat a big plate of cheese. Whatever it is, celebrate that you finished a book. Take a couple of days, regain your strength, because you're about to go in and you're about to revise and edit your book. I hope that these steps were helpful. I know no one can tell you how to write a book, but we can give you steps, we can give you tools. If you do want to use my basic 5-point plot strategy, then the link is below. There's no hidden tricks. You don't have to sign up for my newsletter. It's literally just a free gift for you to download. It's PDF. You can print it up, whatever you want to do, but hopefully that will help you get through some of those points in your book, and I wish you the best of success. And stick around for the following weeks. I'm really excited about this series. Next week we will be doing how to plan your launch of a book, and I'm pretty excited about that because I have, over the last couple of years, really had some hits and misses, and I think that hopefully I have some insight into how to plan your launch successfully. Again, if you liked today's video, please give me a thumbs up, smash that subscribe button, and hit the little notification bell so you get notifications every time I post a new video. And until next week, I'll see you guys later.